Hi, I'm Dr. Deb Hecker, and I'm delighted that you're here. There are a couple of things I'd like to do this morning. The first thing is to introduce you to me and how I became somewhat of an expert on the psychology of divorce, and also to talk a bit about how the right kind of divorce counseling can actually facilitate the healing process as well as help you to divorce-proof future relationships. Each individual has their own experience of the divorce process, but there certainly are some universal aspects that everybody shares. I'm sure there are some common thoughts, feelings, etc., that you may have experienced with other people, such as, I feel completely helpless, I'm never going to get over this, I'd like to kill my ex, will I ever stop crying, etc., and on and on. But you're not alone. Divorce really challenges the basic sense of who you are, who you've been, and who you're going to become. And if you ask anybody who's gone down the road of divorce, they will tell you that divorce rocks the very foundation of your being. And it can cause you to feel helpless, hopeless, and completely isolated. So I'm sure it's not much of a consolation that even though millions have gone on before you down the same road, you have to go on your own journey. But I have gone on this journey, and perhaps I can make it a little bit easier for you. But first, let me tell you a story. When I got married many years ago, I probably, like you, was pretty sure I would avoid the crash and burn relationships that were happening all around me. I mean, after all, I had been married to a wonderful man for 17 years. I had two beautiful daughters, and I was at the top of my game professionally. And I was like, wow, life is good. But boy, was I naive. And one day I was brought to my knees. I had a big wake-up call. I had recently moved to a major city for my husband's job, and I had just started developing a practice. And I had a very grueling afternoon of having to hospitalize a drug addict. Anyway, I got home early, and very uncharacteristically, my husband was there. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And we sat down, and he looked at me directly in the eyes, and he said, I have a commitment to another woman. And I knew at that moment that for him, the marriage was over. For me, I knew I had a long journey ahead of me. And at that moment, I seriously questioned my ability as a partner. I thought I'd been a pretty good partner. My identity as a non-partnered person. I mean, who was I if I wasn't a we? And I also questioned my ability as a professional. Did I really understand what a strong, healthy relationship was all about? So I was absolutely bereft. I actually realized that I knew what it meant to feel like you're going to die of a broken heart. His death would have been easier for me than when I knew what I had to go through. So, of course, I sought out help. There were many good doctors in this major city where I lived. However, there was a problem. Most of the therapists that I spoke with only understood one aspect of the divorce experience, and that was the grieving aspect. Of course, whenever there's an attachment and then there's a loss, people are going to grieve. What they did not understand, which was very problematic for me, was that when one goes through a divorce, they have to develop themselves as a non-partnered person. And so I was kind of lost because I only could get so far with these people. So I embarked on my own journey. And I did a lot of introspection on a personal level. And professionally, I did a huge amount of research looking and studying attachment theory as well as models of different interpersonal relationships. And what was important about that is I didn't want other people to go down the road that I had to go down, which was to really really creates a model of divorce counseling that works. So healing from a divorce is a 3-step process. Let me tell you about the 3 steps. Step number 1 is that you have to move beyond the grief. As I mentioned earlier, whenever there's an attachment and then there's a loss, people are going to grieve. Characteristically, people think of grief as a unidimensional emotion, sadness. But the fact is that grief really consists of many, many different raw emotions that oftentimes are contradictory. So, for example, one could feel love, one can feel hate, one can feel sadness and pain, but also feel relief. They can have feelings of guilt, remorse, etc., etc. What is also important to mention about grieving is that grieving is painful. And so typically people are going to want to avoid feeling pain. I mean, you can't blame them. But going through the grief process is extremely important. People try to avoid it by means of quickly developing another relationship. They will engage in certain compulsive behaviors such as drugs or alcohol, sex, gambling, etc. Step 2. Step 2 is developing an identity apart from your partner, which I mentioned. In order to fully understand why your marriage failed, you have to go back in time, not to the place where you first met your spouse, but rather back in time to the early childhood relationships where you learned about attachment, where you learned how to have healthy relationships. You learned from the early parenting experience about attachment, trust, empathy, how to deal with anger, etc. So what's important about that is as we look at those early experiences, we can see what worked positively in your adult marriage and what worked negatively. And then you have the opportunity to identify those that did not work positively and to change those behaviors. Step 3, the final step, is that you have to learn a new relationship model. Let me talk about the divorce statistics, and which will help you understand why I believe it's so important that you develop a new relationship model. We all know about 50% of divorces if the first marriages hover around 50%. In second marriages, the divorce rate is up to 62%. And in third marriages, the divorce rate is a staggering 70-something%. So basically what we're talking about is that people repeat the same patterns. So I felt it was very important to develop a relationship model that will ensure that people have healthy relationships and don't go down the divorce rabbit hole again. I developed a model called Yours, Mine, and Ours, Romantic Partnerships Done Right. And what is important about this is that in any successful relationship, there are 2 things that have to be addressed: the growth of the individual and the growth of the relationship. And my training allows me to help people to get into their own intrapsychic dynamics as well as understanding the relationship model. So in conclusion, the effective divorce counseling will help you with 2 things. It will help you to develop a stronger sense of self, which may have been underdeveloped during your marriage, and then also how to bring this new self into a healthy relationship. And then you will be in a better position to develop good co-parenting skills if you have children with your former spouse, become accountable for your new independence. It will help to liberate you from the past, and it will also help you turn your divorce, which you may see as a failure, into an opportunity for growth. Most importantly, I'm here to tell you that you can be happy again. So thanks for joining me. I would welcome you coming to my website at www.drdeborahhecker.com if you would like to learn some more about the divorce experience. Thank you.